And hello everyone, welcome back to another Bootstrap tutorial. So in the previous tutorial we went through installing Bootstrap, or rather linking it from online depending on which you choose. I am choosing to use the installed version just because I can use it offline. But if you have no problem with internet connection, you can do it the online way and you're good to go. In this tutorial, we'll be talking about containers and grids. Containers and grids are basically what makes up some of the most fluid things inside of Bootstrap. By fluid, I mean once this window size changes, it responds and just resizes according to the screen width. Alright, so first let's talk about the container. Now there are two types of container. The first is just a normal container. Remember, you should have Bootstrap linked above here. And this container just is a basic container to hold things. So I can put a button here that says click me, and I can put like a break line tag here, and then I could put some text. Cool. Now if I were to show you how it looks without this container, then you'll see something like this. However, this does look somewhat ugly. But what you could do is you could use this container, and it should have a class of container. You'll notice with everything in Bootstrap, it uses classes to say how things should look. In this scenario, we're saying this should look like a container. If we save this, then you'll notice we now have a little border at the side. And as we resize the screen, the border also resizes. So now that it's a bit bigger, the border is also bigger. If we make the width even bigger, as you can see, it becomes bigger. So yeah, the reason I'm using a div specifically here, now that we're also on the topic, is just because that is usually what is being used. But this can be any container element. In fact, actually any element. So I could go here and make this a section tag. That's perfectly fine. It will work perfectly fine. If it has this class right here, then it can have this class right here. But it is recommended to have this right here be something that contains other elements. The next one is the container fluid, like that. Whilst with container, it resized this space here depending on the width of the window. With container fluid, it will continuously resize that space here. So there's not a one size fits all. So if we were to run this, save it first and then run it, you won't really notice much of a difference, except that now there's a border, but it doesn't get any bigger. Like a little margin there. Now the reason behind this is some people would like their website to stay the same size on specific sizes of screen. For example, if the phone screen is this big, then it should have this size of text on it. If it's this big, it should still have that same size of text on it. But if it's bigger than that, then the text should expand and become bigger. This isn't something you have to worry about just yet, but it's something you can take note of, that a container resizes every occasionally, whilst a container fluid resizes continuously. And if you're not sure which one to choose, just choose the one that you think looks best. If you like having this more space here at the side, then choose a container. If you like having a little space here, choose container fluid. And if you don't know at all, just don't put a container there at all. Now if you want the padding in this container, that's this part here, to be bigger, then you can also go here inside of the same class, add a space and say PT5. And this will give it a higher padding. So this means padding, top, and then 5. But yeah, that's just something you might want to take note of. It's not really too important. I never really use it. I just add some CSS, which we'll get to in a future tutorial. You can also add a custom border to your container by saying border. And it is incredibly light. Right there is the border. It's very difficult to see, but it is there. Then you can give it like a dark background by saying BG dark. Now it has a dark background. However, now the problem is that we can't see the text. So then you can say text white to specify that the text should be white. Now I didn't quite explain this MY5. This means add margin on the y-axis and 5 of it. So right here, this would be X from left to right, and Y would be up and down. But yet again, this isn't too important. In this scenario, we're only working with the container, so none of that is too important. It's just things you might want to know about. Cool, and that's the containers. Let's move on to the grid. The grid system is something very, very useful. It allows you to kind of space out what you want to have together. So here I'm going to go inside of this container fluid. This could also be a container, whichever you prefer. Now let's start talking about the columns and the rows, or in this scenario, the grid system. Now, I think the best way to show you what I mean is by showing you WeSchools, because I've always found this to be the best place to actually visualize what is happening. So let me just bring this over here, this example. Here we have the grid system. Every page has 12 grids, 12 items in the grid, 12 columns. You can split these columns up into spaces on how you want to break up your program. And depending on what you choose, you can have up until 12 different columns or one big column. So let me actually show you an example, which I think would be better. Now I'm going to create a row because you have a column and then you have your rows. The columns goes inside of the row because for every row you'll need columns. Then here we can specify a column that is SM. I'm going to explain that in a second. And here we can go 6. And we can make 2 of them. Then here we can put a p tag and specify some lorem. And maybe here we could put a form that has an input of type text and a button. As you can see, it split the page up into 2 sections. One section for 6 columns, another section for 6 columns. And this is inside of a row. Each row has 12 columns. So if you do this, then now you'll have 2 rows with 12 columns. This doesn't have to add up to 12. For example, you could say 3 and 6. That's perfectly fine. Now this one will look like this because this only uses up 3 of the 12 and this only uses up 6 of the 12, which is a total of 9. You shouldn't go over your limit though. If you put the 9 here, then it will just get confused because there's only 12 columns per row, and now we have 15 columns. So you should make sure to not go above 12, but you can go below 12. If you were to put a 12 here, then this will take up this entire row. And then these two would be split because they're in their own row, taking their own space. You could make this a 4, and we could make this an 8. Now it will take this space. And depending on how we resize the page, for example like this, you'll notice it still changes as it should. But if we resize it to be smaller, then at some point it will all go underneath each other. That is called responsive web design, and that is what this does. This creates a column. This is how small the screen has to be, and this is how many columns you're getting. If we were to make this an LG, and this one as well in LG, then this will break up once the screen is no longer considered large. So as we go like this, then now it's there, but once the screen reaches a point where it's no longer considered large, it will break up and it will go underneath each other. Unlike these two, which are using SM for small, this one is using LG for large. So you can go like that. I usually just stick with MD. So MD. So if you don't know which to choose, then just choose MD. That's a good rule of thumb to have, because MD means medium. However, you could also tell Bootstrap to choose one for you. And then you can just do something like call. And this will automatically resize this one to use the remaining space. So if we were to now go like this, let's just make this SM again. SM. And let's make this 4 or 3 instead of 8. Now this one will take all of the space and leave that open. So this will then automatically take up the remaining space because it has no other things after it. If you were to take this one away as well, then it'll take up equal amount of space, and you can add as many extra columns as you want, and it will add that amount of space as required. And that's the basic grid system. It's really that simple. If you don't always remember what you could do with the grid system, I do recommend checking out WeSchools because they have a great just show of how you can use the grid system. And I'll always love how they show you that. So here, like, look at all this they show you. They explain how all of this works. I did the same just now. I just gave you a more physical example. So here, or let Bootstrap handle the layout, and then they give you an example. And here they show you how every column gets used. So if you are confused, or if you maybe forget, or anything like that, then with the grid system, I definitely recommend checking out WeSchools. But yeah, now the rest of the facts you might just want to know is that the grid system, it resizes to fit the screen, as we said here. The reason that is beneficial is because you can have multiple sizes of screen. So let's create another 2 columns here. We full screen this. And we go here. Now on a 4K screen, it will look like this, which doesn't look too great, but we're not focusing on massive screens. On a normal laptop screen, it will look like this. On a laptop screen, it will look like this. So this is a large laptop screen, this is a normal laptop screen. And then on a tablet screen, it will break up, and this one will now go to the bottom. Then this, and you could of course force it to have specific sizes for each. For example, here you can say free or SM free. Whoa. And here as well, like that. It will give you the same output, but in this scenario, since they're all SM free, they will now all fit into the same screen. And once you go a little bit bigger, as you can see, it'll split up a bit. But then there we go. Then once you get to a mobile screen with or a mobile device with a large screen, it will look like this. It will split up and it will fall underneath each other instead of next to each other. Since if they were next to each other, it will look absolutely horrendous. And once we get to the smallest screen, you'll notice it also does that. But without Bootstrap, so if we were to remove this Bootstrap here, like that, and let's also remove this row here, just to show you, then there we go. It goes bigger, 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 and as you can see, it's still underneath each other. Bigger, this one, still underneath each other, bigger. So it doesn't really respond to different screen sizes. It just kind of lays there flat without any special ability. But yeah, we'll cover this more once we do the project we're going to do in Bootstrap. But for right now, I think this is perfectly fine. This is just so you know you can put a grid system on your page. And a grid system allows you to say when your page should split from using everything next to each other to everything underneath each other. You can practice with this on your own and see how you can make your websites look better by using a grid system instead of just regular HTML. And you can play with the containers as well to see which container fits your website the best. And that is that. Thank you for watching. I hope you all enjoyed and now understand the basics of the grid system as well as the containers. And I will see you all again in the next Bootstrap tutorial.